Good morning and welcome to our Sophos Intercept X webinar here at Bytes with myself, Mark Simmons and Matt Cook. I work here at Bytes as a business development manager for Sophos and sit as an overlay specialist for your account managers here at Bytes Software Services. We here at Bytes work very closely with Sophos, and as a result of that, one of a few platinum partners in the UK. Were awarded Enterprise Partner of the Year last year. On a daily basis, we are seeing a massive growth in ransomware, techniques that are being used, and most significantly, the number of businesses that have been affected by ransomware. We want to take this opportunity to talk to you on ransomware and how Bytes and Sophos can help prevent ransomware outbreaks within your organization.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mark. I'm super excited actually to talk to you today here with Bytes and really to talk about a brand new product from Sophos, which is designed for protecting your endpoints. It's called Intercept X. It launched just over a week ago now, and we've had some fantastic feedback from the market already. It's actually been, we've obviously been running it in beta for a little while, and I think some of you on the call may actually have been playing with it in beta, which has been fantastic, and thank you for your feedback during that process. As I say, it's been out, it's live now, it's for just over a week. And what I want to do today is just really spend some time for, first of all, kind of going through, why we created the product, what was the need for it, and what need is it addressing, what problems is it solving. But I spend as much time as I can actually showing it to you in action. We're going to look at a couple of examples, or in fact, we'll walk through a kind of a screenshot demo of ransomware in action, how the product can help protect against ransomware. So we'll talk about all the features and functionalities that it has. We'll look at the management capabilities and the analysis capabilities, and then hopefully we'll keep enough, in fact we'll make sure we'll keep enough time at the end for Q&A. So as we're going through, if you've got any questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat box, even if you think I might answer them later on in the session. Stick them in anyway, and we'll get to them at the end because it'll be good to cover them off. So I guess first of all, let me start out by kind of explaining why we saw the need to create a completely new endpoint security product, and why we're having a completely new approach to endpoint security. And what we see today really is that attacks commonly evade our traditional perimeter defenses. So the perimeters that we've built around the network, they're not really, they're simple to evade these days. People just web browsing to any sites, and what we're seeing is that the attacks actually focus on the software we use every day. Those attacks are focused on looking for known, perhaps unpatched or even unknown vulnerabilities that exist in the software that we use every day. And that software is effectively then being turned against us. And by software, we're referring to things like Internet Explorer or your favorite web browser. We're talking about Office applications, Adobe PDF, the typical applications that people use on a daily basis, and they've got vulnerabilities in those applications. We all stick our patches on as soon as they've come out, or at least I hope we all do. I mean, evidence tends to suggest that we don't, but hopefully we patch as soon as we possibly can to plug those vulnerabilities, because that's the most common methods being used to actually deliver advanced forms of malware down onto our machines. And those advanced forms of malware are really, there's none more prevalent at the moment than ransomware itself. And ransomware is huge. It's a huge example of this. I mean, it's reached over, I think it's 1.2 billion in damages, in US dollars in damages already over the past year. And that is huge. If you're infected by ransomware, if you've had a ransomware infection, you've kind of got two choices. What do? You spend the time completely wiping all your machines and starting again, or do you pay up? And people take one or other of those choices. Neither's free. Both involves cost. Both involve significant effort. And even if you do pay up and you decide to try and get your data back, what sort of state are your machines left in? What's to say you're not still vulnerable? So the ransomware itself is a huge challenge for organizations right now. And we also see problems around kind of lack of threat intelligence after a breach. It's not just that malware kind of gets in and is being cleaned up. It's, well, okay, how did it get in? Once it got in, what did it do? What files did it touch? And there's a significant kind of shortage of skills and of resources within a lot of organizations to effectively be able to respond to a breach. And those factors really combined, have kind of driven the shift to the next generation of endpoint security products. It's driven the shift towards, we need to address these problems around advanced malware such as ransomware. We need to address the problems around exploit-based attacks, exploiting the vulnerabilities that exist in our software. And we put zero-day exploits here on the screen, but it's not just zero-day that's the problem. It's certainly exploits and vulnerabilities that are affecting actually known vulnerabilities, i.e. patches are available, and we're just not putting the patches on in a quick enough fashion on all of our machines or ensuring that they're on to plug those gaps. And so that that's a real problem that's driving the shift to next generation endpoint security there. And similarly, limited visibility, dealing with what actually happened, how it came in, what it did once it got in, how do we clean it up, not just remove the malware, but how can we undo everything that it did as well, and having the skills and the resources within our organizations to do that. So to kind of understand how this new Intercept X technology that we're talking about today, to understand how this technology differs from traditional AV or anti-malware that you're used to using perhaps already on your endpoints, let's look at some of the components of those applications, many of which will be found already in, for example, Sophos Endpoint Protection that some of you may be using, or other AV providers that you've got already running on your desktop, maybe perhaps even Windows Defender and some of those, or from other vendors as well. But some of these technologies, you can kind of you can refer to a lot of these already as kind of next gen. I mean, if we look at Sophos Endpoint Protection, for example, there's technology in there that use crowdsourced download reputation to say, well, is this a good file when I download it or not? Have other people had problems with it? Have we seen it before? And so we can determine whether it's good or bad at that point. And we can block, obviously, known bad URLs. We can do pre-execution analytics and look at the way files behave already once they're on our machine. So if we download a program, what's it going to do before it actually runs? So there's some great technology which, coupled with the traditional functionality of AV, which is signature-based file scanning, looking for the presence of malware on files within on the system already. That's really, I guess, the core of traditional antivirus or traditional anti-malware products that you're using today. And so, as I just mentioned, some of those have next-generation technologies in them, but they don't tend to address the real problems that we have today around exploits, around exploit detection. How can we stop these vulnerabilities in the software that we have today being exploited in order to deliver the malware down? So how can we stop people web browsing to a website and that website being infected with malicious code, then exploiting a vulnerability in order to deliver malware down onto that machine without the user knowing or doing anything about it? That's a real challenge that we've got. And how can we do that in such an efficient way where we don't need to know anything at all about the malware itself? In other words, to do this in a completely signatureless fashion. So if we can prevent delivery of the most common forms of malware, or rather stop the most common delivery routes of malware in a signatureless, very, very efficient and lightweight fashion, then we've got a really effective solution. And if we couple that then with some behavioral analytics to look at the way that programs behave on systems, such as ransomware, for example, so we can detect ransomware if it comes in through other means, perhaps that has been missed by traditional malware, perhaps by a file that you've downloaded or a USB key that you've plugged in. That's where addressing those advanced threats comes in, and that's where next generation, this completely new approach to endpoint security that Intercept X has. And when we define next generation security, we kind of look at all of the threat vectors that could impact your endpoints, right? We look at things like malicious URLs, unauthorized apps running, removable medias, and some of these we obviously you already protect those through your traditional AV or traditional endpoint security that you're running. But then we go on to the exploit prevention and the anti-ransomware protection and incident response capabilities. And the reason that we talk about those in this next generation, this advanced and new approach to security bucket, is because what we see, and in fact NSS Labs did some research recently where they put out a stat that 90% of data breaches that they looked at recently came from exploit kits. So we're seeing a huge rise in the use of these exploit kits. And by an exploit kit we mean Fairly simply, there are kits available freely out there on the web that malicious actors and people are using to, if they compromise a website, for example, they can put an exploit kit up on there so that if you happen to browse to that website, the code on that website is then going to maliciously look to try and exploit known vulnerabilities and also, in some cases, unknown vulnerabilities that may exist in your web browser, for example. Or the exploit attempt may have arrived through perhaps a Word document attachment or a link that you received in an email that you clicked on, downloaded, and opened that attachment as well. And so we know that the vast majority of data breaches are coming through exploit kits. And we know of all of those data breaches as well, that 90% of those exploit attempts are actually using known vulnerabilities. And again, this goes back to the case that we were talking about of patches are already available for these vulnerabilities, but the vast majority of breaches that take place are coming in through effectively unpatched holes that exist in the software today. And organizations have no backdoor for that. If they're not on top of patching immediately, as soon as patches are available, and they can't ensure that, then ultimately there's a problem, there's an additional risk or a vulnerability that they need to mitigate. And that's, of course, what we're going to be trying to do with the Intercept X, and we'll talk to you about exactly how we're doing that. And we talked earlier as well about then, okay, well, when malware gets in, what do we do about it? Well, I think the SANS Institute did a research recently that suggested that more than 60% of IT staff lack incident response skills. I actually think it's not just skills that they lack, it's more resources that our organizations are not necessarily funded or have the right resources in order to be able to effectively respond. And so, if we can help address these problems of exploits, help address these problems of malware by preventing threats before they reach the device, by preventing them before they run on the device, by being able to detect them once they run on the device or if they get on the device somehow, and more importantly, how we then respond to that. It's the combination of all of those factors, covering all of those threat vectors, that allows you to create then your own next generation endpoint security that sits on your endpoints and designed to protect your endpoints. And that's where Intercept X comes in. Intercept X from Sophos is our completely new approach to endpoint security. It's us addressing those advanced threats, addressing the advanced malware, the exploits, and addressing the skills shortage for you. And let's have a look exactly how we're doing that. So when we're talking about advanced malware, specifically in this case, we're talking about ransomware getting on your machine. Intercept X has technology in there that we refer to as CryptoGuard. And what CryptoGuard does is it looks for malicious encryption activity taking place on your machine. So if we see a process that decides that it wants to go off and start opening all your files, encrypting them, and writing them back to the disk, we're able to detect that behavior. And in fact, we've effectively been able to detect all known forms of crypto ransomware that we've seen. And we're not doing it because we know about the ransomware. We're doing it because of the way that the ransomware is behaving. Because the ransomware, when it gets down onto your machine, can come in many forms. What we've seen is there are cases of ransomware that you get just exe files or programs that get run that you've downloaded on the machine. But there are also cases that come in through exploits that actually look to leverage the code that already exists in applications like Word or Internet Explorer or Edge or Chrome or these other applications that you use, that effectively then turn those applications against us. The actual encrypting program itself can be Word itself. Well, in most systems, Word is a trusted application and therefore it's allowed to run. And so most systems will think that it's perfectly normal for Word to start opening all of your documents, encrypting them, and writing back to disk. Well, Sophos Intercept X CryptoGuard technology will detect that activity and will be able to spot after a few files become encrypted. We can then say, oh, hang on a minute, that's unusual behavior. We'll remove the hard disk from this process. Not only will we remove the hard disk from that process, when that activity was going on, we were keeping a small cache of read and write activity. And so we're actually then able to restore the original file. So let's imagine that we detected it after the ransomware has been running on your machine and 3 or 4 of your Word documents got encrypted. Well, Intercept X will intercept that encryption attempt, it will remove the hard disk, and it will roll back those original files for you. So from an end user's perspective, they could get ransomware on their machine 3 times in a day, and they probably wouldn't actually lose any files at all, and they wouldn't have any issues associated with that. Of course, they'll get a toast notification that you'll see in a bit, and admins can get the full details on exactly what went on that. But the whole idea of CryptoGuard and anti-ransomware technology is to prevent ransomware attacks and to detect them and roll back those changes. And then Intercept X introduces anti-exploit technology that just typically doesn't exist in common endpoints today, which, given that we've said that 90% of all breaches come in through software vulnerabilities or being exploited, anti-exploit technology plugs that gap, and this is completely signatureless. And so this basically allows us to prevent the most common delivery method of malware coming down onto your system. And do it in a signatureless way, because what we've done is looked at all the exploit attempts out there, identified the common methods and techniques that these exploits use within system environments to say, well, if we can intercept every one of those techniques, we don't need to know anything at all about the malware. So whatever malware is coming down, could be ransomware, could be Trojans, could be remote access Trojans, or whatever it happens to be, it's absolutely irrelevant, because we will intercept that attempt to deliver in the first place and actually stop it from getting down onto your system. And that then alleviates the pressure from yourselves to actually then deploy patches on a really rapid basis once the vendors release them. Because if we're plugging those gaps for you already, you've got then an extra layer of protection against the software vulnerabilities that, of course, we all know that we have, but we don't know we can fix them until the vendors release the patches. So there's an extra layer of protection that gets built in there for you that's completely signatureless and therefore incredibly lightweight. And then Intercept X addresses the visibility problem for us. We have a tool called root cause analysis, which root cause analysis is part of the management console. It's a web-based management console we refer to as Sophos Central. And root cause analysis gives you the visibility of exactly what went on. It will give you a nice graphical representation of, it came in here, it ran here, it did this, it opened these files, it modified these settings. It'll give you a nice picture of that, but more importantly, it will then automatically go out and clean all of that up for you as well. So it has a very granular cleansing method. So instead of just saying, oh, I found some malware, I'm going to quarantine it and remove it for you, it says, yeah, we found some malware, but you know what? It changed these 3 files, modified this registry, and made all these other settings changes as well. We'll go in and undo all of those for you and restore your state back to your system back to its original state. So you have then automated incident response capabilities, but also a nice graphical tool to see exactly what went on in the case of any attack that takes place. All right, so that's kind of enough talking, I think, about Intercept X. Let me show you some of this actually in action now, so that you can kind of get a good walkthrough. All right, let me explain what I've got on the screen here. Okay, so this is my a desktop screenshot that we've got here. We've got Outlook running on the left-hand side of the screen as you're looking at it. You can see an urgent email that's come in with a Word document file attachment in there that I need to go in and open. On the right-hand side of the screen, to kind of aid the sort of visibility, what we've got is Windows Explorer opened up to a folder of some documents, and in there we've got just some standard, well, in this case they're RTF documents, just to help display those on the screen, but it could be Word documents or Excels or whatever they happen to be. So we've got a bunch of our normal working files in our documents folder. Then on the bottom right of the screen, we've opened up the Sophos Intercept X UI, which generally this would sit down in the system tray. If a user clicks on the system tray, obviously this would open up and they would get to be able to see that. So just to give you an idea of what's going on, we thought we'd open that up on the screen for you as well. But let's kind of walk through our scenario. Effectively, what we're going to do in order to demonstrate this here, we're actually going to demonstrate some ransomware in action. So we're going to open up the Word document attachment. Embedded in that attachment is some code that's going to look to exploit a vulnerability within Word in order to download a malicious piece of ransomware and then execute that on our machine. The ransomware obviously will then run. It will then encrypt all of our files, and then it's game over, right? That's the way the ransomware goes. Well, we're going to sort of step through and show you exactly what Intercept X will do in that scenario. Now, in order to demonstrate this, I've mentioned already the code in Word is actually going to look to exploit a the code in the Word document will look to exploit a vulnerability within Word. Now, of course, our anti-exploit technology is going to stop that right at the start. So the ransomware itself is never going to run. So for the purpose of this demonstration, we've had to turn off all of the anti-exploit capabilities in order to let ransomware get on your machine in the first place. Now, we could, of course, demonstrate the ransomware coming in through other means. You might have perhaps USB keys if you haven't got any USB controls, or you might have downloaded these files or whatever it happens to be. Ransomware can come in through other means, so you still need the ransomware protection that we're gonna show you. But let's kind of walk through what's going to happen here. So, Word document. Let's click on the Word document. We open the Word document here, and you can see we get the protected view and the option to enable editing and enable macros on there. Well, users being users, everyone does it, right? We're just going to click on that enable editing, launch the macro, and then immediately Word gives us an error. It's like, oh, that looks strange, what's going on? Down in the bottom right corner, we can see that we've got a ransomware that's been blocked already. So the Sophos Intercept X agent has popped up. It's given us a toast to say that ransomware has been detected. Now, if we look at our files, what actually happened to our files when the ransomware ran, what you can see is that we got some hydrocrypt versions of their files that were picked up, right? Because the ransomware actually ran on our machine, it started encrypting files. Well, if we try and open one of those encrypted files, we'll double click on one of those, you can see the content itself has been encrypted, so there's kind of no way back for me there. But the great news is that alongside that Sophos Intercept X has restored the original files automatically for me. So I can still get full access back to all of my original files. So even though ransomware ran, it encrypted the first, 4 files there before we detected and intercepted it, we wound back the clock, we got your original files back, and so everything is good from an end user's perspective. So that's the ransomware running, or the ransomware CryptoGuard technology running out on the endpoint itself, protecting the endpoint from ransomware forms of ransomware. But of course, as we mentioned, in order to show you that, we had to turn off the anti-exploit in order to let the ransomware in the first place. Of course, the anti-exploit prevented the attack coming through. But if we look back now on the management console, we can see what was going on. So this is the management dashboard where we call Sophos Central. If you're already a customer of some users of some of Sophos products, you probably already use Sophos Central to manage those. Sophos Central is our cloud or web-based management platform that you can use to manage our endpoints. You can use it to manage servers. You can use it to manage wireless devices, firewalls. All of our vast majority of our products and services can be managed online through this dashboard. Some of them can also be managed on-premise, of course, with your own management servers as well, and some of those can be migrated up to here. But you log into Sophos Central, immediately you've got an alert. We can see there we've got a high alert that we can step through. If we look at the detail on that, it tells us that CryptoGuard has detected some ransomware, and it gives us the process name of the ransomware there. It tells me the user that was impacted, it tells me the machine that was impacted, and if we then look on the root cause analysis tab, we can start to look at the details. Now, I've got a lot of examples here that I can run through from various demonstrations, so I'll pick on the top one. The whole idea of root cause analysis is it will tell us what happened, where it happened, when it happened, and how. So in this case, it was what happened. Well, we saw CryptoGuard kick off, and it intercepted some ransomware, and 24 business files were involved. So 24 files, right? Okay, so that's a fairly significant impact. Where did it happen? First of all, we can see there the system name, the username. When was it detected? How did it start? Well, it all started in Outlook because, of course, I opened a Word document in Outlook, and so that was the root cause. Everything kicked off from Outlook. Now, if we go to the visualization, what we have here is a simple graphical view of exactly what went on. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen with the red dot, we see the root cause, which if we hover over that will show us that that's Outlook. On the right-hand side of the screen is the blue dot, which is the detection or the beacon. And that, in this case, if we hover over that, is the tester.exe. And so if you recall, what we did was we opened Outlook, we opened a Word document attachment, so Word was run. Word then went off, downloaded our malware, and then launched the malware itself, or the ransomware itself, that ran on our machine. And we can look at all of these phases that happened if we start looking. So we've got our look at the root. We can then go on and look and see, well, if we click on one of the processes, we can look at all the network connections from that. So it was actually Word making the call out for us to various network addresses where the file and the ransomware itself was downloaded from, and probably the encryption keys for the ransomware as well were downloaded from. So we've detected all of those, and we give you a full audit log of those. If we then look at the ransomware itself that got pulled down and run, we can get a list of all of the files that were touched by the ransomware. So we get full details, a full audit trail of everything that was touched by the ransomware out in the system. Now, all of the other dots on the screen here are all various parts of the system that were touched or changed by these processes that ran. And so we can get a view of what registry keys were involved, what other processes, if any, were involved. So, you know, processes, keys, and network connections are all displayed to you here. Yeah, and we can group that up to give you a full list of all the business files that were impacted, a full list of all the IP addresses involved in the attack, for example. And you know, but for the sake of simplicity, in the overview and in the summary, we also give you an activity record. So you can kind of go in here, put some notes in to say, yep, this was detected, it's been cleaned up, you know, the threat's been neutralized, or you know, you can put some details into the case so that you keep a record of everything that went on within every attack that takes place. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of the anti-ransomware capabilities within Sophos Intercept X. And you know, the technology that I've described, we refer to the anti-ransomware technology as CryptoGuard, and you know, this is the ability to stop that malicious encryption activity that takes place out on your machines. And of course, one question that often comes up at this point is, well, how are you rolling back those original files? Well, CryptoGuard keeps a small cache of typical user files that we're accessing, like Word documents and things like that, for the last X amount of files, and then can roll back those. Now, of course, it's not going to cache things like massive gigabytes of VMware images and things like that for you, because we don't want to be impacting system resources. And equally, we're not going to use volume shadow copy, which is something available within Windows to do this, because we've already seen lots of ransomware that actually deactivates volume shadow copy. And so we know there are other ransomware products, anti-ransomware products out on the market that use volume shadow copy. So word of caution really around that is that, you know, ransomware can effectively shut down that service, which means that any other rollback processes can't take place. So CryptoGuard overcomes that by keeping our own cache and being able to automatically revert back any affected files for you and identify the source of attack. So Intercept X gives you anti-ransomware, it gives you anti-exploit, and this is the signatureless exploit prevention technology. That means it's taking the pressure off the need to patch as quickly as we do. It's intercepting all of the exploit attempts that come through, because you know, what we see is, among all of the exploit attempts that we see taking place out in the wild, they generally tend to use a handful, probably of around 20 techniques amongst all of these attacks. And so just by identifying and intercepting all of those, we have an incredibly efficient way to protect you from having millions of pieces of different malware being that could be delivered down to your machine, but just by intercepting a handful of techniques in a signatureless fashion. So incredibly light footprint, incredibly low false positive rate as a result, because it's only looking at exploit attempts. It's not having to commit the actual malware itself. And then Intercept X, as we said, gives us the root cause analysis. It gives us that IT-friendly incident response tool, the ability to automatically respond, to automatically clean up everything that's running out on our system if anything does happen to get detected. Now, Intercept X can be run in a number of different ways. We've actually built this Intercept X to run alongside, if you already use, for example, Sophos Endpoint Protection. If you're using our Sophos Central Managed Endpoint Protection, Intercept X can run alongside that. If you're using our on-premise managed endpoint protection, you will need to migrate to have it managed through Sophos Central to take advantage and use Intercept X. But Intercept X can effectively coexist. It utilizes the same agent. We just deploy the functionality out to the existing Sophos endpoints that you already have out there managed by Sophos Central. But equally, it can run alongside any vendor's antivirus or anti-malware product or endpoint solution that you're already running. So if you're using semantic endpoint protection, Trend, Kaspersky, maybe you're even using one of these next generation antiviruses like Cylance that does file scanning. They effectively reinvented the wheel around file scanning to make sure that they can detect viruses without signatures, which is awesome, but it doesn't solve the problem of getting preventing the malware from getting down on the machine through the exploits in the first place. So you need to layer on top of those traditional AV products anti-exploit technology and specifically anti-ransomware technology to address the day threats, and of course then give you advanced visibility. So we've built Intercept X to run alongside, or rather on top of those, which effectively allows you to then create your own next generation endpoint security, if you like. You can carry on running the vendor's AV or anti-malware product that you already use and put Intercept X on alongside that in order to give you that extra bit of protection. And it takes your endpoints up to the next generation, giving you that advanced malware protection, so specifically addressing the problem of ransomware, protecting you against exploit attempts, whether they're zero-day or whether they're just trying to exploit unpatched vulnerabilities, and giving you the additional visibility that you probably don't have today of not just quarantining malware, but actually understanding exactly what the malware touched on the system, going back in automatically and undoing all of those changes, down to even like registry settings and files that have been changed on the system as well. So having that full capability of visibility and ability to actually respond, that's effectively what Sophos Intercept X gives you, and that is our completely new approach to endpoint security and our new product that we mentioned that we've recently released. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea of what Intercept X is and how it operates. It's available to trial now. Our good friends at Bytes can help you get a trial up and running, give you access to the software so you can run it alongside your existing endpoint if you are running it. Or you can even, if you're already using Sophos Endpoint Protection, you can, from managed by Sophos Central, you can automatically deploy that agent out into the field as well in order to take advantage of the capabilities. So that kind of, hopefully it gives you a good overview of everything, what everything is. I think what we're going to do now is start having a look at any questions that we've got in the chat box. So let me see if I can bring up any questions. So yeah, actually I'm going to ask our colleagues at Bytes if you can, I guess, shout out any questions. I don't have visibility of them on my screen, so if you've got any that have come through there, feel free to shout them out at this point.
Thanks, Matt. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through. So the first one we've got is, does Intercept X stop member, the new full disk encryption ransomware family member, as it encrypts hard drives instead of files and folders?
Okay, so sorry, the question was a little bit quiet there, but I think I got that. Does it? So how does it interoperate with full disk encryption products? Is that the gist of it?
I'll repeat that for you, Matt. So does Intercept X stop member, the new full disk encryption ransomware family member, as it encrypts hard drives instead of files and folders?
Okay, I'm not familiar with the specific example, the one that you've mentioned there, but I can certainly follow up and kind of let you know around that. My expectation is that yes, it would. So interestingly, with Intercept X, what we've done is tested it against all known forms of crypto ransomware. So we've seen that it's been effective against all of those. Ultimately, the one thing that's common, whether the encryption product is doing individual file encryption or whether it's attempting to invoke full disk encryption as well, is that ultimately there has to be a process that starts that. What that process has to be invoked somehow, it has to come in somehow, and typically it will come in through an exploit attempt. So even if it comes in, even if it's not necessarily picked up by CryptoGuard, it's equally going to be blocked by the anti-exploit technology. So yes, I would fully expect it to, but what I will do is make sure I follow up with our labs team, and I'll get you a specific answer on that form that you mentioned.
Perfect, thank you. So the next one we've got is run in Webroot, which has a similar approach but doesn't provide the root cause analysis. Can Intercept X run alongside Webroot, or do they conflict with each other?
Yeah, it can, and we've got lots of examples where it is actually already out in the field. So yeah, a lot of people, a lot of other products actually that are out there right now will talk about having anti-ransomware capabilities, because ultimately ransomware is just another form of malware, right? So if your product can detect malware, you can claim that you have anti-ransomware capabilities. So I guess the key point here is to kind of understand the differences between our CryptoGuard technology and what essentially an anti-malware product is doing. And CryptoGuard is looking specifically for the behavior of ransomware technology, of ransomware hitting the machine, rather than looking for the malware itself. So very different in the way it is. I guess we kind of picture CryptoGuard is almost like your last chance saloon protection against ransomware. And that's really why it has been designed to run alongside existing endpoint solutions, including those from Webroot and others as well.
Perfect. So the next one we've got is, will it work with Citrix, within Citrix, sorry?
Okay, so yeah, I guess we're talking about like remote desktop environments, VDI type environments. Yeah, so you can of course run endpoint protection within those environments. I would also look at our server products as well. We have, if you're managing the server aspect of it and the virtualization aspect of it, we have specific server protection products. And in fact, it's probably worth mentioning actually, we'll be adding a CryptoGuard technology to the server-based products very soon as well. So that will be coming in the next couple of months. You'll hear us talking a lot more about that. So yeah, you can run the endpoint protection within and the Intercept X within a virtualized desktop if you wanted to do that. But you may also be, from a performance perspective, depending on how you're looking at running your endpoint protection, what other endpoint AVs and things you're running, you may be better looking at the server protection as well.
Okay. So a couple more. How is Intercept X deploying using another product such as McAfee EPO? Is there a loss of product functionality at all with integrating?
There's just gains all round, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, if you're using McAfee EPO to manage your endpoints already, what Intercept X is going to give you on top of that is anti-exploit capabilities on the endpoint and the anti-ransomware capabilities on the endpoint. It will also then give you the management and visibility layer as well, that's available through Sophos Central, specifically looking for beacons and alerts that come out of the Intercept X agent that get picked up. Now, given that we've already said that the most common form or the most common cause of data breaches was through exploit attempts, and that most of those exploit attempts using sort of known vulnerabilities, and some of them even use unknown vulnerabilities, they're ultimately exploit attempts. It's the anti-exploit technology within Intercept X that will probably pick up most of the bad stuff coming through anyway. So emails, phishing attempts, links that you click on, files that you download, websites that you visit that are looking to take advantage of vulnerabilities within the software will get picked up by that. So you'll most likely see more detections coming through Intercept X than you're being able to manage through your other tools that you have running, such as EPO.
Perfect. So the last one that we've got here is, would this product also cover network attached storage, and how would it integrate within a VM environment?
Okay, awesome question. Yeah, so a couple of things actually I haven't mentioned about that, so I'm really glad you brought that one up. Right, so how does the anti-ransomware, the CryptoGuard technology work on, let's talk about file sharing, first of all, file share. So I've got my laptop, it's got Intercept X running on it, CryptoGuard's protecting my hard disk. If I share my files out and you connect to my drive, you connect to my hard drive through a file share, perhaps you even map that file share. If you get infected with ransomware on your endpoint, there's every chance that that ransomware will start going through your file shares. And so it's probably going to start trying to encrypt all the files on my disk, and it will certainly try and encrypt all the files that sit out on your servers as well. Now, the good news for me is that my Intercept X running on my endpoint is actually going to protect me from the ransomware that's running on your machine. So it's going to detect that a remote network connection is attempting to encrypt all of my files, and of course it will then intercept that. It will disconnect the drive from that process and roll back my files to the original state. So I'm in a hunky-dory state. Everything's good for me. For you, unfortunately, not quite so good because your endpoint's currently infected, and equally the server itself is also infected as well because it's been encrypted by your endpoint. So that's the reason why we're adding CryptoGuard technology into our server protection product, and we would encourage that server protection or the product be used in order to protect the files on there. And of course, if you had Intercept X on your endpoint, then we wouldn't have been in this problem in the first place, so that we would have been all good as well. So right, so that's kind of the whole idea, is that Intercept X CryptoGuard technology is running in all the places where files are shared out from. As far as network attached storage goes, when if there's a server process running behind that you can run our server protection product on, then great, we can add that in the CryptoGuard technology. So stay tuned for more news specifically around server from us in the next couple of months on that, and similarly around VMware and virtualized environments. So I alluded to that earlier on as well, we're looking at ways to introduce that anti-ransomware capability into those environments as well.
Perfect. We've also had a couple more since then. So mentioned around server coming in a couple of months. So does this currently just cover workstations, not cover server operating systems such as Windows Server 2003, 2007 and 2012?
Yeah, good question. I haven't mentioned operating systems at all. Intercept X is designed for Windows 7 and above, 32 and 64-bit. So if you're running Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, whatever it happens to be, you're all good from an Intercept X perspective. It is designed for endpoints. From a server perspective, we will be adding it to our Server Protection Advanced product, managed by also Sophos Central as well. So you'll have a single dashboard where you can manage endpoints and servers through. And that will be coming. Keep mentioning a couple of months. I can probably get a little bit more specific. I believe we're targeting November timeframe for release on that. I'm not sure exactly on the status on the beta, but if anyone has a particular interest to kind of get this on servers sooner rather than later, then definitely have a conversation with Bytes after this, and we can let you know exactly what we're doing around sort of any testing and stuff if you're interested in getting involved in that.
Perfect. So we've also got a couple more that are coming through now. So another one we've got is, so if you have this on every endpoint, would that alleviate the need for using the server product?
It possibly would, right? Well, in a perfect world, yes. I mean, imagine what that perfect world looks like. It means that there's no endpoint anywhere on your network that could have the ability to get, or the capability to get ransomware on it. Let's be honest, I don't think we live in a perfect world. I think there's always a device somewhere that won't have endpoint protection on it. There's always a user that will bring a device in, whether that's a mobile device even that runs ransomware, and they've tried to connect to a file share. Maybe it's someone even just using the web browser on the server itself, and thinking that they were downloading a patch for the operating system when in actual fact some malvertising hit that system and encrypted it as well. So I do strongly believe that there will always be the need to actually protect all systems, and that will include servers as well. But I think the majority of infections we see and breaches we see right now are coming through the endpoint and are attacking the endpoint. But of course, the server holds the big prize, because if you can encrypt all the data on the server, then you can charge a higher ransom to get that back. So it really is important to think about covering that as well.
Perfect. Next one, are you seeing any ransomware on Macs?
So that's a good question. Again, another one I'll probably post to our labs team after this. I don't specifically follow the trends on Macs quite so much. So Intercept X, as I mentioned, isn't on a Mac platform, but it is something that we are looking at. And yeah, there are cases that ransomware is getting onto all devices now. I mean, we've already talked about mobile. I think there's even been proof of concepts out there where ransomware's got onto your TV. And I know I've got a Samsung TV in my home that's got a web browser built into it, which I wouldn't dare use because I have no idea, what sort of vulnerabilities that thing has in it. But people do, right? So whatever the device is, if there's vulnerabilities there to be exploited, people will look to get malware down onto it. And that includes Mac devices as well. And so we already have our Endpoint Protection Advanced product for Mac devices with good capabilities to detect threats that come through, and that will include malware such as ransomware as well. So there's good protection in there already, but we are looking at ways that we can introduce some of the Intercept X functionality onto other platforms as well.
Brilliant. So next question, will the CryptoGuard only work with Central? We have an on-premise management server.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so if you're already using endpoint protection from Sophos that's managed by the on-premise server, which is called Sophos Enterprise Console, then yes, in order to use Intercept X, you need to migrate your endpoints to be managed by Sophos Central. And the reason for that is that nice UI and all of that telemetry is all fed back in by Intercept X to Sophos Central. So that we built Intercept X so that you can't install it on the same machine that's being managed by Enterprise Console as well. So there is a kind of a process to go through. I'd recommend that first of all, set up a Sophos Central trial, download a Sophos Central Endpoint Protection Advanced and Intercept X agent combined, run that, have a play with that, and if you're happy at that point, we've got a migration tool that can then help you migrate your endpoints automatically across to Sophos Central Management, so that when you're ready, you can then push down the Intercept X agent and that CryptoGuard technology automatically out to those endpoints as well. But yeah, there is a step to go through to move your agents to be managed by Sophos Central rather than Enterprise Console. If there's a particular reason that you don't want to do that, or perhaps there's a regulatory requirement that says you can't have your endpoints managed by an online console, then we are actually looking to introduce the CryptoGuard technology and the anti-exploit technology to on-premise managed endpoints in the very early part of next year. Don't expect root cause analysis and that visibility and the graphics and the visualization. Don't expect that part to come, because that is very much uses the telemetry that's available up in the cloud. It uses a lot of crowdsourced data in there as well, and that's not something that we can deliver and visualize down on within Enterprise Console. So limited functionality, but yes, it will come to endpoints. But I would recommend looking at migrating to Sophos Central Management, because that's where you're going to find a lot of the new features and functionalities arriving first.
Perfect. And would that be the same sort of change in migration for when the servers come into play?
Indeed, yes. Again, the capability will come into the central managed server products as well. Yeah.
Perfect. So last question that we've got here, will the product cover Macs, Linux as well as Windows machines?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on that one. So yeah, Windows 7, 32 and 64-bit versions and above, everything above Windows 7. Not Mac and Linux. On the server side, again, they'll be focusing on Windows servers initially, but we are looking at other platforms as to how we can introduce the Intercept X functionality onto that. So yeah, more news, I guess, it's come in the future as we look at the demand for those other platforms. There's certainly hearing demand already for Mac. Interested to hear about Linux and more about that. So yeah, just keep talking to us about that. It's all good info. Thank you.
Perfect. That's wrapped up all the questions that we have so far. If there are any further questions that anyone has, please contact myself or your account managers here at Bytes Software Services. We will be sending out a link following this webinar where you can download the full webinar with all the questions on as well. Thank you for your time.